the containment field hummed with a frequency that made Dr. Kira Chen's teeth ache. She stood perfectly still in the center of the Valthrine throne chamber, her hands zip-tied behind her back, sweat trickling down her spine beneath her torn research coat. 3 days ago, she'd been cataloging genetic samples on the research station Meridian. Now she was a prisoner of war, and the alien scientist examining her blood sample was laughing. "Primitive," Scientist Velish announced, her crystalline voice echoing off the obsidian walls. She held the vial up to the chamber's violet light, her 4 amber eyes glittering with contempt. "Look at this disorder. Random mutations, chaotic repair mechanisms, no structured evolution whatsoever." She turned to the assembled court, her translucent wings fluttering with amusement. "The humans call this their genetic code. I've seen more sophisticated patterns in bacterial colonies." Kira kept her face neutral, counting her breaths. The Valthrine guards flanking her didn't move, their segmented armor reflecting the bioluminescent walls. Beyond them, the throne room stretched into shadows where hundreds of courtiers watched with unblinking compound eyes. At the far end, elevated on a platform of living crystal, sat Queen Thracia herself, silent and ancient, her presence a pressure Kira felt against her skin. Velarish continued her presentation, manipulating holographic displays that showed Kira's DNA sequence. "See these telomeres? Already degrading. This specimen is merely 30-second cycles old, yet her genetic material shows significant deterioration. The Valthrine maintained perfect cellular integrity for 3 centuries. These humans are defective by design." A ripple of agreement passed through the court, a sound like wind through glass chimes. Kira bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper. She'd heard the reports before her capture. The Valthrine thought humans were evolutionary dead ends, too weak to warrant consideration in their expansion through the galaxy. That belief had led to the massacre at 3 colony worlds. That belief had killed her research team. "Your Radiance," Velish bowed toward the throne, "I recommend we classify humans as Category 5 organisms. Not suitable for assimilation, not worthy of alliance. Eliminate and repurpose their worlds." Kira's heart hammered against her ribs. Category 5 meant extinction, meant Earth itself would be targeted. She opened her mouth before she could stop herself. "You're reading it wrong." The chamber fell silent. Every courtier turned toward her. Even the guards shifted, their weapons humming to active status. Velrish's 4 eyes focused on Kira with the intensity of microscope lenses. "The specimen speaks," Velish said softly. "Dangerously. How amusing. I'm a geneticist." Kira kept her voice steady despite the tremor in her legs. "And you're interpreting human DNA through a Valthrine framework. That's like trying to read poetry as mathematics. You'll get the letters right and miss the entire meaning." Queen Thracia leaned forward, first movement Kira had seen her make. The gesture sent a wave of tension through the room. The guards stepped closer to Kira, their claws clicking on the polished floor. "Explain yourself, human," Velish commanded. "Before I recommend immediate termination." Kira's mind raced. She had one chance, one moment, to make them understand. "You see chaos in our DNA because you're expecting order, but our chaos is our strength. Those random mutations you mock? They're why we survived ice ages, plagues, predators that should have wiped us out 1,000,000 years ago. Your DNA is perfect, unchanged for millennia. Ours adapts every single generation. Adaptation through degradation," Velish sneered. "Hardly efficient." The words came out before Kira fully formed the thought, not just analysis. "Put my cells under real stress and watch what happens." Velish's wings stilled. "What kind of stress?" "Your choice. Radiation, temperature extremes, toxins, pathogens, anything you think will prove your point." Kira met the scientist's gaze, refusing to look away. "If human DNA is as weak as you claim, the cells will die and you'll have your evidence. But if I'm right, if our genetic code does what I say it does, then maybe you'll reconsider making us Category 5. The Queen's voice cut through the chamber, deep and resonant, each word carefully measured. "This proposal interests me. Velarish, you will conduct this experiment. Immediate live testing, full court observation." Velish bowed, but her expression showed fury. "As you command, Your Radiance, though I assure you the result is predetermined. Human genetic material cannot possibly begin," the Queen said, and the single word carried absolute authority. Technicians rushed forward with equipment. Kira watched them prepare the testing apparatus, a crystalline chamber that would subject her cells to conditions designed to tear DNA apart. Through the transparent walls, she could see the entire court gathering closer, their curiosity overriding their disgust. The guards removed her restraints but positioned themselves within striking distance. Velorish extracted a fresh blood sample with clinical precision, then placed the cells into the chamber. Holographic displays materialized around the room, showing microscopic detail to every observer. Kira's cells floated in the suspension medium, magnified 1,000 times, their nuclei glowing with the fluorescent markers Velorish had added. "We begin with thermal shock," Velorish announced. Temperature dropped from standard to near freezing in 5 seconds. Come on, she thought. Do what you're designed to do. Survive. The temperature plummeted. Through the holographic displays surrounding the chamber, Kira watched her cells convulse. Ice crystals formed in the suspension medium, sharp geometric patterns that looked like knives under magnification. Several cells ruptured immediately, their membranes splitting like overripe fruit. The Valthrine court chittered with satisfaction. As expected, Velish declared, manipulating the display to highlight the dying cells. Complete structural failure. Shall we proceed to the next test, or have we proven sufficiency? Look at the surviving cells. The chittering stopped. In the holographic projection, roughly 40% of her cells remained intact, but they weren't simply enduring the cold. They were changing. Their membranes thickened, growing denser as Kira watched. The cytoplasm inside reorganized, molecules clustering together in new configurations. One cell divided, and its offspring showed even more pronounced adaptations. Velorish's wings fluttered uncertainly. Temporary resistance. The cellular damage is still accumulating. Increase the cold, Queen Thracia commanded. Take it to the minimum temperature your equipment allows. The chamber's temperature dropped further, well below anything the human body could naturally survive. More cells died, but the survivors continued their transformation. Kira recognized the process from her years of research, cellular mechanisms that most scientists thought were vestigial remnants of ancient environmental pressures, except they weren't vestigial at all. The remaining cells are producing antifreeze proteins, Kira said, keeping her voice level despite the wonder she felt. Glycoproteins that prevent ice crystal formation. Some Arctic fish have similar adaptations, but they inherited them over millions of years of evolution. My cells are generating them in real time. A Valthrine courtier in the front row leaned forward, his translator Chip rendering his clicks into human speech. Impossible. Genetic adaptation requires generational change, selective pressure across thousands of breeding cycles. For your species, yes. Kira turned to face the assembled court, aware she was addressing them without permission, but knowing this was her only opportunity. Your DNA is stable, optimized, perfect. It doesn't need to change because Valthrine biology already solved every problem your ancestors encountered. But humans evolved on a planet that tried to kill us constantly. Extreme climates, new diseases, changing food sources, predators, disasters. We didn't have time for slow generational adaptation. We developed genetic systems that could respond within a single lifetime. Within hours, within minutes when necessary. Velorish's 4 eyes narrowed. You're describing fantasy. No known organism possesses such capabilities, permisses such capabilities. Then you don't know humans very well. Kira nodded toward the display. My cells are doing this on their own, without conscious direction, without external intervention. It's automatic, it's built into every human at the molecular level. The queen rose from her throne. The movement silenced the entire chamber. She descended from the platform with deliberate steps, her robes flowing like liquid mercury. Every eye followed her as she approached the testing apparatus. When she stood before it, she examined the display with an intensity that made Kira's breath catch. Continue testing, the queen said. I wish to see the limits of this phenomenon. Over the next hour, Viaris subjected Kira's cells to a gauntlet of stresses. Radiation bombardment that should have shredded DNA into fragments. Acidic solutions that dissolved organic matter. Bacterial toxins engineered to destroy mammalian cells. Oxygen deprivation. Heavy metal contamination. Each test killed a portion of the sample, but each time a subset of cells survived and adapted, developing resistance mechanisms that left the Valthrine scientists speechless. During the radiation test, some cells increased their DNA repair enzyme production by 300%. During the toxin exposure, others modified their membrane proteins to actively pump out the poison. When deprived of oxygen, a group of cells switched to anaerobic respiration, a capability Kira hadn't even known human cells retained. This is not standard cellular response, Valerish admitted, her voice tight. These are coordinated, systematic adaptations occurring far too rapidly for random mutation and selection. Human DNA contains millions of years of survival information. Every challenge our ancestors faced, every environmental pressure that didn't kill them, left instructions in our genetic code. Instructions that activate when needed. You see chaos because you're looking at a library of solutions, not a single perfect answer. A different courtier spoke, an older Valthrine whose carapace bore the scars of age. If what you say is true, why do humans still die? Why are you considered weak across the galaxy? Kira swallowed hard. We die because the adaptations take time we don't always have. Because sometimes the stress is too extreme, too sudden. And we're weak individually because we weren't designed to be perfect alone. We were designed to survive as a species, to carry forward the genetic lessons learned by those who came before us. Every human alive is the descendant of survivors who faced impossible odds and found a way through. That inheritance is encoded in every cell. The Queen turned away from the display, fixing Kira with a gaze that seemed to penetrate through flesh and bone. You speak of your species with pride, yet you stand before us conquered, your research station destroyed, your colleagues deceased. Where is your vaunted adaptability now? Kira felt the familiar grief rise in her chest, the faces of her dead team flashing through her mind. Amity, who'd made terrible coffee and brilliant insights in equal measure. Lieutenant Torres, who'd promised to teach Kira guitar when they got home. Young intern Choi, barely 20, who'd been running toward the escape pods when the hull breach caught him. You're right, Kira said quietly. We lost. Your weapons were superior, your ships faster, your tactics more sophisticated. You beat us completely. Then your genetic advantages mean nothing. Valerish made a dismissive gesture. The strong dominate. The weak perish. This is universal law. Is it? Kira looked at the displays still showing her cells, still alive, still adapting despite everything Valerish had thrown at them. Your species conquered 100 worlds before you encountered humans. You've never lost a war. But you've also never fought a species like us. We don't just adapt biologically, Your Radiance. We adapt culturally, technologically, strategically. Every defeat teaches us. Every loss makes us better. The Queen's expression remained unreadable. Are you threatening us, human? No. Kira met her gaze steadily. I'm warning you. You can destroy our colonies. You can kill millions of us. But you can't kill the information. Every human who survives your attacks will carry the genetic memory of how to resist you better. Their children will inherit that knowledge. And their children after them. You'll be fighting an enemy that becomes more adapted to defeating you with each generation. The courtiers shifted uneasily, their wings rustling like dry leaves. Even the guards seemed uncertain. Queen Thracia circled the testing apparatus slowly, her attention moving between Kira and the displays. When she spoke, her voice carried across the vast chamber with quiet power. Bring me a Valthrine cellular sample, she commanded. Subject it to the same stresses. I wish to see a comparison. Velish's wings flattened against her back, a gesture Kira had learned meant distress. Your Radiance, such testing is unnecessary. Valthrine's cellular superiority is well documented. You will comply with my command. Valerish provided the Valthrine sample with visible reluctance, extracting cells from her own body with a crystalline needle. The technicians loaded them into a duplicate testing chamber beside the one still containing Kira's surviving cells. The holographic displays split to show both samples simultaneously, Valthrine on the left, human on the right. The contrast was immediate and striking. Valerish's cells were larger, more complex, their internal structures organized with geometric precision. They glowed with a soft blue luminescence, a natural property of Valthrine biology that had always seemed magical to human researchers. Under normal conditions, they were objectively superior to human cells in every measurable way. More efficient energy production, more accurate protein synthesis, more robust structural integrity. Begin with thermal stress, the Queen ordered. Identical parameters to the human testing. Kira watched both displays with her heart pounding. Her cells, already adapted from the previous test, barely reacted to the cold. They'd retained their modifications, their membranes still thick, their antifreeze protein still active. Valerish's cells, encountering the stress for the first time, responded differently. They tried to maintain homeostasis through brute force, pumping energy into membrane stability, reinforcing their structures with the same mechanisms that had worked for 300 million years of Valthrine evolution. For 30 seconds it worked. The cells held stable even as ice crystals formed around them. Then, suddenly, catastrophically, they began to fail. The membranes cracked. Internal organelles ruptured. Within 2 minutes, 90% of the Valthrine sample was dead, and the remaining 10% was dying. The court erupted in shocked chittering. Velerish stared at the displays as if they'd personally betrayed her. There must be equipment malfunction, she stammered. Valthrine cells are superior. This result is impossible. Silence. The Queen's voice cut through the noise like a blade. The chamber fell quiet instantly. She stepped closer to the displays, her ancient eyes studying the data with clinical precision. Continue. Radiation exposure. Same levels as before. The technicians complied. Fresh samples, both species, subjected to intense radiation. Kira's cells activated their enhanced repair mechanisms, the same ones they'd developed during the previous test. Damaged DNA sequences were identified and fixed within minutes. Cell division continued with minimal errors. The Valthrine cells attempted their standard radiation response protocols. Normally adequate for the cosmic radiation of space travel, they found themselves overwhelmed by the testing equipment's output. Their DNA, so carefully preserved over millennia, began accumulating mutations they had no rapid mechanism to repair. The cells tried to trigger apoptosis, programmed death to prevent damaged cells from propagating, but the radiation was too intense. They died in disorder, the perfect structures crumbling into fragments. Kira felt no satisfaction watching this. If anything, she felt a strange sadness. The Valthrine weren't evil, just supremely confident in the genetic perfection that had served them flawlessly for longer than human civilization had existed. That confidence was now shattering before their eyes. Valish ran 3 more tests, each with the same result. Toxins, oxygen deprivation, heavy metal exposure. Each time the Valthrine cells fought with admirable resilience, but ultimately failed when conditions exceeded their evolutionary experience. Each time, Kira's cells adapted and survived, drawing on genetic strategies developed during humanity's brutal climb from the African savanna to the stars. "Enough!" Queen Thracia finally said. The displays shut down. The testing chambers retracted into the floor. She turned to face the assembled court, her presence demanding absolute attention. "What we have witnessed today challenges our fundamental understanding of genetic superiority." Velish opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. Her wings hung limp against her body. The Queen continued, her voice measured and precise. "The Valthrine achieved perfection through stability. We optimized our genetic code over hundreds of millions of years, eliminating weaknesses, refining strengths. This strategy has granted us 3 centuries of life, bodies resistant to disease, minds capable of holding vast knowledge. We looked at other species and saw only inferior versions of what we had already perfected." Kira stood motionless, barely breathing, aware that the fate of humanity hung on whatever came next. "But perfection," the Queen said softly, "is a terminus, not a path. It is an ending achieved, a question answered. The Valthrine cannot adapt rapidly because we have no need to adapt. We solved the problems of survival so completely that we forgot survival itself requires constant solution." A courtier in the back rank spoke up, his voice trembling. "Your Radiance, surely you do not suggest that human genetic chaos is superior to our refinement?" "I suggest," the Queen replied, "that superiority is contextual. In a stable environment, Valthrine genetics reign supreme. But the universe is not stable. It is violent, chaotic, unpredictable. And in such an environment, the advantage belongs to those who can change faster than the circumstances that threaten them." She walked to Kira, stopping close enough that Kira could see the intricate patterns in her compound eyes, fractals of consciousness looking back at her. "You said every defeat teaches your species," the Queen said, "that every loss makes you better. This is the essence of adaptation, is it not? Learning from failure. Incorporating new information, becoming something slightly different than what you were before?" Kira nodded slowly. "Yes, Your Radiance. Then the Valthrine have been committing a grave strategic error." The Queen's voice rose, addressing the entire court now. "We have been attempting to eliminate humanity because we saw weakness where we should have recognized resilience. We saw disorder where we should have recognized potential. We saw primitives where we should have seen survivors. Your Radiance. With respect, they are still technologically inferior, militarily weak, culturally fragmented, for now." The Queen's words silenced her. but you have shown us today that human cells can develop complex adaptations in minutes. How long before their cultures and technologies learn with similar speed? How long before every military defeat teaches them how to fight us more effectively? How long before we create an enemy that evolves faster than we can conquer them? The implications rippled through the court. Kira could see understanding dawning on face after face, wings fluttering with sudden anxiety. I propose a different strategy, the Queen said. Not elimination, not conquest, but observation and, where possible, cooperation. Let us study this adaptive capacity. Let us understand it fully before we make decisions that cannot be unmade. Kira's legs nearly gave out from relief. Not a full alliance, not even necessarily a peace treaty, but enough. A chance. A reprieve from extinction. Time for humanity to prove it was worth more alive than dead. A senior courtier, his carapace marked with the insignia of military command, stepped forward. Your Radiance, what of our current campaign? The human colonies we have targeted? The Queen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute power. Suspend all offensive operations against human territories. Immediately. Bring our fleets to defensive positions. I want diplomatic channels established within 3 solar cycles. And the human prisoner? Velish asked, her tone carefully neutral. The Queen looked at Kira with what might have been respect. Dr. Chen will be given full laboratory access and a research team. She will continue her genetic studies, and she will share her findings with both species. Consider it the foundation of our new understanding. Kira found her voice. Your Radiance, I'm honored, but I need to ask, why? Why does my genetic code matter enough to change your entire war strategy? Because, the Queen said, you made me ask a question I have not considered in 3 centuries of life. You made me wonder if perhaps the Valthrine achieved perfection too early, if our evolutionary endpoint might have made us brittle instead of strong. And any species that can make me question 300 million years of certainty deserves very careful consideration. She turned back to the court. This audience is concluded. Velarish, you will work with Dr. Chen directly. I expect weekly reports on your progress. All court members will adjust their strategic assessments of humanity accordingly. We are not abandoning our expansion, but we will be significantly more thoughtful about who we choose to incorporate and who we choose to destroy. The courtiers began filing out, their chittering filled with confusion and speculation. The guards remained, but they'd lowered their weapons. Velarish approached Kira, her 4 eyes unreadable. You humiliated me today, the scientist said quietly. In front of the entire court, you made my research look foolish. Kira met her gaze. I showed you something you hadn't seen before. That's not humiliation, that's science. For a moment, Velarish said nothing. Then, surprisingly, her wings lifted slightly, a gesture Kira recognized as grudging acknowledgement. Perhaps. We will see if your adaptive chaos can contribute anything useful to serious research. The laboratory will be ready tomorrow. Try not to contaminate anything. She walked away, her posture stiff but not hostile. Kira stood alone in the vast chamber, the weight of what had just happened settling over her like a physical thing. She'd bought humanity time, possibly even a future that didn't end in extinction, but she'd also committed herself to working alongside the species that had killed her friends, destroyed her station, shattered her life. The Queen's voice echoed from the chamber's entrance. Chen, one final question. The Queen stood in the archway, silhouetted against the violet light beyond. Your adaptive genetics allow survival through change, the Queen said. But do they allow forgiveness? Can you work beside those who have caused you harm? Ahmadi, Lieutenant Torres, young Choi, thought of the colonies destroyed, the families broken, the lives ended, felt the grief sharp and fresh in her chest. Then she thought of Earth, vulnerable and threatened, depending on what happened next. Adaptation isn't just physical, Your Radiance, she said. Sometimes it means changing how we think, who we trust, what we believe is possible. It means surviving not just the external threats, but the internal ones too. The anger, the desire for revenge, the need to hold on to pain. Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this after you have to send up that side of a species to the chest? The Queen nodded once, a gesture that somehow conveyed satisfaction despite the alien physiology. Then she was gone, leaving Kira alone in the chamber where humanity's fate had shifted with the behavior of cells too small to see. Kira looked at her hands, these ordinary human hands that had somehow changed everything. Tomorrow she would begin work in a Valthrine laboratory. She would study the genetic code that had saved her species. She would teach aliens about human resilience, and perhaps learn what Valthrine perfection might offer in return. But tonight, she let herself feel it all. The grief for those lost. The fear of what still might come. The exhaustion of carrying such enormous consequences. And underneath it all, buried but unbreakable, the same stubborn determination that had allowed her ancestors to survive ice and fire, famine and plague, a million years of threats that should have ended the human story before it truly began. She was alive. Her species was alive, and as long as humans could still adapt, still change, still learn from every challenge that tried to destroy them, they would keep finding ways to survive. Kira walked out of the throne chamber with her head high, carrying the weight of hope and burden in equal measure. One more human doing what humans had always done, facing the impossible and finding a way through. The story of humanity wasn't written in certainty or perfection. It was written in the chaos of survival, the beautiful disorder of adaptation, the endless capacity to become something new when the old way no longer worked, and that story, she knew with absolute certainty, was far from over.